Yes, Veena, please start. Please unmute yourself.
Today is a very special day. Why? Because the last day, and all of you know that the last day is the best day. Yes, that's it. And today, all of us celebrate the life of William Shakespeare. All of us look forward to this time when we know that Shakespeare occupies a position unique in world literature. Other poets such as Homer, Dante, and novelists such as Leo Tolstoy and Charles Dickens have transcended national barriers. But no writer living reputation can compare to that of Shakespeare, whose works in the 17th century for a small repertory theater are now performed and read more often and in more countries than ever before. The prophecy of his great contemporary, the poet and dramatist Ben Jonson, that Shakespeare was not of an age, but for all time. It proves true, as has been fulfilled. It may be audacious even to attempt a definition of his greatness, but it is not so difficult to describe the gift that enabled him to create imaginative visions of pathos and mirth that, whether read or witnessed in the theater, fill the mind and linger there. He is a writer of great intellectual rapidity, perceptiveness, and poetic power. Other writers have had this quality, but with Shakespeare, the keenness of mind was applied not to obscure or remote subjects, but to human beings and their complete range of emotions and conflict. I'm not here to deliver the entire lecture, but today, this wonderful morning, we have a very erudite and eminent personality amidst us. And Dr. Dinesh Kumar Nair, very much present here. Welcome, sir. A hearty welcome to you. Dr. Dinesh Kumar Nair is Professor, Dean Research, Head Department of English of BJ Vaze College, Mulund, Mumbai. Sir's area of specialization is literary theory, African American literature, and eco-criticism. Sir has a doctorate degree in African American literature from the University of Mumbai, and he heads the English Research Center at BJ Vass College. His areas of specialization are literary theory and African American literature. If you see the research interest and research supervision of Sir, it's really very, very vast. And when I was just talking to Sir, I was interacting with Sir, I mentioned to Sir, Sir, please kindly send me a resume and your CV. It was 53 pages. 53 pages. I said, oh my God. So it's really mind-boggling, and to just introduce you in a short span of time. It's not easy, sir. And I really say you are really a mentor to go ahead. Sir has published and presented more than 35 research papers and published more than 40 articles in peer-reviewed journals, copious UGC Care listed. Sir has also co-authored and edited 3 books for the University of Mumbai, Linguistic and Stylistic Analysis of Text, Translation Studies, and Literary Theory. Sir has been teaching at the undergraduate and postgraduate level for 30 years and has guided 23 students for their MPhil degree. 6 scholars are working with him for the doctoral degree, and 8 have been awarded PhD. Sir has even been the resource person and keynote speaker in various national and international conferences. So today we just don't have a national erudite professor, but we have an international resource person amidst us this morning. And Sir's talks, I would just like to say a few of them, which are very interesting topic that Sir has talked about. That is food waste and gustatory identities in migration, emerging areas of research in American literature and culture, ethnicity in diaspora, toxic discourse and watershed consciousness, eco-critical perspectives on the contemporary culture. These are just a few of them, and that's not all. Sir has conducted a short-term course, Emerging Trends in Literature and Language, studied at SRM University, Sikkim. Sir has organized a NAC-sponsored national level seminar on SSS and has completed RUSA Train the Trainer program. Sir has even been the member of Board of Studies of three. Sir is the member of Board of Studies of 3 universities and 3 autonomous colleges. Sir has been actively involved in mentoring, training corporate employees of L&T, Infotech, ACT Logistics, and Christ Institute. So all of you have been hearing that what a versatile personality, what an erudite personality we have amid us this morning. And without much ado, without taking much time, I would like to welcome Sir to share his wonderful insights and perspectives about William Shakespeare this morning. And I'm very sure all of you are going to end up with a wow and aha moment. Really, it's going to be that way, end up learning. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. Over to you now. Thank you.
नवीन जॉब मिळाला का सर का माइक चालू नहीं हो रहा है
Yeah. Could I check first? I'm audible enough? Veena madam?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Am I clear, distinct and audible?
Yes, sir.
All right. So here we go. And I'm also sharing my slides. Please let me know once the slides are visible for all of you.
Sir, slides are visible. You can make it full screen. Share screen and
And
make it full
I've come
screen.
to, yeah, I have done that. I've done that. I'm sharing the full screen.
Full screen, yeah.
Yeah. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can we then make a beginning? So very good morning. Let me put on record my highest sense of appreciation to all the efforts that have been taken by this Shakespeare Society of Central India, which has been spearheaded by 4 leading colleges in Nagpur region. And all these staff members have been very close to me. They're as much close as my extended family, because I've been to Nagpur a number of times. And in particular, Professor Karthik Panikar, Professor Veena, all of them have been a part of my, we have been collaborators for quite a long time. So it's, for me, it's a kind of homecoming, though on a virtual platform. So at the outset, let me just record my sense of appreciation and gratitude for having been called to address all of you, a group of budding scholars, professors, postgraduate teachers, and quite a number of literature enthusiasts. And it indeed is a great effort, again, on the part of this Shakespeare Society of Central India, to string together a number of lectures, talks and discussions on Shakespeare, especially on the birth anniversary occasion, on the occasion of birth anniversary. So Shakespeare continues to live, and will continue to probably influence all of us, will trigger a lot of responses from all of us, maybe even 500 years hence. So in continuation with this kind of optimism is my discussion today. I have titled my talk as Drama of Affliction, Illness and Health in Shakespeare. Now, what I intend to do here, maybe in about an hour or so, or maybe a little more, I'll be hand-holding all of you into an interesting discussion on what is called medical humanities. The perspective that I'm taking is that of medical humanities, and I'll come to define that a little later, but at the basic level, what I intend to do is to look at Shakespeare as a source, very important source of medical science, treatment, health, hygiene, diagnosis, and so on. People have been getting back to Shakespeare on various grounds, including the environmental concern, gender, and in continuation with this interdisciplinary engagement, we have medical humanities perspectives on Shakespeare. And why is it very important? Why don't we read Shakespeare only as literature, and why do we read Shakespeare in a very interdisciplinary and maybe in a complex, thereby a very complex way? The answer is that the departments of humanities and English studies have been undergoing drastic changes, particularly after the pandemic. Taking the input and the tenets and tools of various other disciplines to make the study more relevant, more contemporary, and thereby have new perspectives on the existing literature. So that is what I intend to do. So that's the title, A Drama of Affliction. Affliction stands for diseases, all kinds of diseases and physical and mental agonies that human beings going through, illness and health in Shakespeare. So I begin with, I don't know whether I'm able to, is the slide moving? Okay, yeah. All right. So I now start with a slide wherein you find two images. One on the left side is in color and the other one is in a monochrome. The image on the left hand side is an illustration. It's a very interesting painting illustrated by a very interesting painter of the name Benjamin West, who then donated this painting to the Royal Shakespeare Company, who continued performing Shakespeare all through England and the rest of the world right into the even 20th century. So this painting currently belongs to the Royal Shakespeare Company, a major professional group that performs Shakespeare all across the globe. The painting is about the final scene in King Lear, where King Lear apparently is recovering from his madness or reported madness, and you also find Cordelia and a number of other people. If you look at them, there are people who are very concerned about King Lear's ailment, because they are not able to find out exactly what the reason for the ailment. That's one painting. And the one on the right hand side was a very interesting practice, a medieval practice which continued even in the Elizabethan era. This practice is called bloodletting. Bloodletting is a medical practice wherein a vein is cut open as a treatment for many diseases during the medieval and in the Elizabethan era. And the diseases which were addressed by this method, by letting out some blood, which we believe, which they used to believe that it is some kind of an imbalance in the blood that caused some of these diseases. And these diseases included plague, gout, epilepsy, and so on. So it was a common therapy which was prescribed for a number of ailments during the Elizabethan era. So here you find the doctor and the patient and a number of other people around who cut open the vein for the blood letting out the excess of blood. And this used to be done with the help of leeches also. Leeches were also used to suck away the contaminated blood in many cases, especially during the medieval and the Elizabethan era. And I move on. Subsequently, let me see if I'm getting to the slide. Okay, there is a bit of an issue, but I'll try to. 1 minute. Once again. Let me share that once again. Let me know once it is available. Just a minute. All right. Yeah. This slide is titled Ailments, Hygiene, and the Bard, a Medical Humanities Perspective. And here I really begin with my discourse. My interest is in the number of ailments that Shakespeare has apparently documented in his varied 30-odd plays, and also the very interesting idea that whether Shakespeare himself was ailing, a very engaging topic of discussion and also research. It is said that Shakespeare was surrounded by a number of ailments, ailing people. Let me put that in perspective. For example, the life expectancy during the Elizabethan era was 42 years. Just imagine that. The average life expectancy of an Elizabethan was about 42 years, which is in contrast in 2024 in England, the life expectancy is around 84. And in India, according to 2021 studies, the life expectancy is about 67 years. So you can imagine, on an average, the Elizabethans lived only not even up to middle ages, maybe around 42. Now, this is a very deceptive figure. If 42 was the average life expectancy, among the urban poor people, the age must have been even less. So people used to die in their 30s and even in their early 40s in the Elizabethan era, maybe because of various infections and diseases which surrounded them. And the second point of interest here is what was the ailment that used to struggle and plague Shakespeare. Shakespeare was also ailing, especially during his later days. It is said that there is a very interesting research which has gone into the death of Shakespeare, and it is said that there are various theories about that. One of them, which is proposed by a Shakespearean scholar of the name Peter Ackroyd. Peter Ackroyd maintains that Shakespeare died of influenza, some high fever, which might have been caused due to either influenza or typhus. Typhus is a kind of fever which is caused by a small flea, infectious fever. So it is said that he died probably of that, but it's not very clear. One can also find some internal references. If you read Shakespeare very minutely, you find Shakespeare referring to a number of on a number of occasions to a term which is specific, which is called fire, F-I-R-E, fire. He talks about a disease which is euphemistically called fire. Fire probably during that time was a term used for syphilis. Syphilis was also called the French fever, or it could be something related to a condition called dysuria, a kind of an infection again, which affects even urinary tract and so on. So Shakespeare, towards the end of his career, he was given treatment for fever, and he was given mercury as a treatment. Mercury as a treatment, unless and until the patient was suffering from syphilis, probably the mercury as a treatment it's considered to be. I'm getting some disturbance. Can I ask all of you to please mute?
Kindly put your mic off, okay? Keep it in mute mode.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. So this is the whole medical controversy that surrounds Shakespeare. The reason for his death still remains a little mysterious, and a lot more research has to go into that. And Shakespeare indeed depicts a number of afflictions of human body, a number of somatic conditions under stress. Like there are references to many ulcers, cataract, palsy, that is paralysis, gout with his rheumatoid condition, rheumatic condition, plague, pox, and many venereal diseases keep on appearing in Shakespearean drama. Many characters evoke these images, metaphors of ailments, either to curse or even to add a rhetoric to their dialogue and so on. There are also ample instances of mental illness being referred to, and these conditions include depression, OCD. There are characters who have OCD. For example, Lady Macbeth keeps on washing her hands post the murder. That is to be considered as a kind of psychic disorder, which could be related to the modern terminology obsessive compulsive disorder. There are also a number of sleep disorders that Shakespeare depicts. For example, sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a kind of hyperventilation and the situation where one is unable to breathe with a rhythm, especially when there is sleep deprival. And somnambulism is another situation. We find sleepwalking again in Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is reported to have been sleepwalking. And Elizabethan era particularly was also, I would so call, a very unhygienic and dirty era in many ways, because the street life was very dismal. There was a painter in 17th century of the name Jim Peter. Jim Peter has rendered a number of paintings which reveal the dismal and deplorable living conditions of the Elizabethan streets. And many diseases sprang from these streets, obviously, because it was also an era of many vectors. Vectors are those animals which carry those parasites and germs. So it was an era of plenty of these vectors and carriers, and Tudor era was quite infamous for not being able to control these pests and animals which carry diseases. Flies and rodents were some of them. And a very interesting trivia to go with that is that Queen Elizabeth herself kept very poor hygiene. It is said that she bathed, rather she took bath only probably once in a month. And there is a sort of an unreliable report where Queen Elizabeth was reportedly had said that I do bathe once in a month, that too if it is necessary. So this statement has been identified with Queen Elizabeth. So one can imagine the condition, especially the condition of hygiene, sense of hygiene during Elizabethan era. I'm just facing just a little bit of problem with my slide sharing. I'll do it again.
Well, you straight away go to slideshow, automatically one after another.
I'm doing, but still there is a bit of a problem. I don't know. Because that's what I'm doing. Yeah. One minute. Yeah. So I come to this idea of medical humanities perspectives that I would like to mobilize into this discussion. So let's look at this whole idea of medical humanities. Medical humanities is a recent interdisciplinary approach which has been started from some of the developed nations, particularly from the UK and the US. There's a very significant interdisciplinary commitment that you find in England, which is at the Durham University. So we have a Durham University Center for Medical Humanities, which became very active, particularly in the 21st century. And in the website, Durham University Center for Medical Humanities defines this term, I quote, an emerging field of inquiry in which humanities and social sciences perspectives are brought to bear upon an exploration of the human side of medicine. So to put it in simple terms, what I intend to say is that it is very integral to understand the significance and the role of literature, history, and other branches of humanities in understanding and in learning about the development of medical science. So once we look at a medical science from a holistic perspective, humanities become a significant component to that. For example, we have something called medical history, interesting branch which inquires into how medical facilities have evolved over a period of time. Secondly, we also have another interesting term called pathography. Pathography is a kind of a narrative or a text about disease, either written by a patient or by a doctor. The people who have survived cancer, people who have survived some deadly diseases have written pathographies. And my submission at the beginning itself is that some of the Shakespearean texts could be considered as pathographies. And another interesting initiative, landmark initiative that I can say, is made by two significant scholars, 21st century scholars of the name David Greaves and Martin Evans. David Greaves and Martin Evans started a journal of the title Medical Humanities. And in one of the inaugural editions of this journal, they spell out the approaches, the basic approaches of medical humanities, both the publication and also as a discipline. Incidentally, David Greaves is a professor, is not a literature professor. Now, my point here is that it is not necessary that Shakespeare should be read and explained only by literary enthusiasts. Shakespeare is read and understood, like Aristotle is also understood by many people from many disciplines. So David Greaves is a professor of inflammation biology at the Hertford College affiliated to University of Oxford. And Martin Evans is the director of Manchester School of Arts. So we find a collaboration between a doctor, a physician, and an art director, director of art school. Martin Evans is a design academic who is interested in working on various designs and the visual appeal of various designs. So in their journal, in their initial issue, they spell out the approaches. And this is how they go about telling that. They talk about two major approaches of medical humanities. I quote, the first is concerned with complementing medical science and technology through the contrasting perspective of the arts and humanities, but without either side impinging on the other. That's very important. Without either side impeding or obstructing or having any negative impact on the other. So medicine and literature are not necessarily adversaries, and they can be collaborative attempts. The second aim, I quote, the second aim is to refocus the whole medicine in relation to an understanding of what it is to be fully human, rather than looking at various parts and even human anatomy and treating various parts of human bodies, to understand the holistic approach to medicine and treatment. The reuniting, I continue quoting, the reuniting of technical and humanistic knowledge and practice is central to this enterprise. We have described these two approaches to medical humanities as additive and integrated, respectively. So what they intend to say here is that literature can add to medical sciences. Similarly, medical science can also add to the understanding and appreciation of literature. So they have an integrated approach rather than a kind of polarized approach to literature and medicine. So this is precisely the point of intersection that I am interested in. All right, I move on. Yeah. Now, looking at another landmark work which came into being and published by a doctor of the name Aubrey KEWAL. Aubrey KEWAL came out with a publication of the title The Medical Mind of Shakespeare. Very interesting book, which gives a doctor's perspective, a physician's perspective of Shakespeare. KEWAL is incidentally a physician from New South Wales, that in 1986 she came out with this interesting work, an interdisciplinary engagement with Shakespeare, wherein among a lot of other interesting details, KEWAL talks about a word called searchers. We, as the survivors of COVID-19 pandemic, we know the word quarantine. Now, the word quarantine came into existence long back during the Elizabethan era, and we find the reference to many references to quarantine in Shakespeare. According to Aubrey KEWAL, the word used at that time was searchers. There were particular officers, medical officers called searchers, who were employed to look into the plague victims and to quarantine them. And the word searchers have no positive reference. People were scared of the searchers because they would be the people afflicted with plague would be taken away. So they were scared of that. So many of these people ran away from the searchers. You find the word searchers being used in Romeo and Juliet. And in addition to that, KEWAL also talks about a number of other ailments that Shakespeare specializes, or rather makes references to. So it's all too well known that the mental illness is a recurring metaphor in Shakespeare. We have the madness of King Lear, the pretended madness of Hamlet, the eventual madness of Ophelia, and we find the reference to madness in Timon, and we also have a number of venereal diseases which are referred to. Whenever Shakespeare uses the word the pox on you, it doesn't have a reference to smallpox. Of course, it's one of the references, but then it is largely a reference to syphilis, a sexually transmitted disease. And in addition to that, there are many epileptics in Shakespeare. In Antony and Cleopatra, we find a reference to epilepsy. Caesar is reported in Shakespeare to be time and again affected by epilepsy. We have many references to pregnancy and childbirth. We have doctors, we have midwives coming in and going out in the play. And also, like in Ben Jonson, during the Elizabethan era, the theory of humors, the various humors, and making any slight imbalance in the humor, like all the bile, the flame, and a number of other blood and a lot of these bodily fluids, making a lot of changes and affecting the dispositions of the characters. So many of these characters are either typecast or they are considered to be under the influence of one of the humors. So all these, along with a number of clinical descriptions, also appear in Shakespeare. So thereby, one can say that Shakespeare has immense value in medical history, in understanding the 16th, late 15th and early 16th century medical England would have been incomplete without understanding that through Shakespeare. So that's the point. Moving further, I also came across an interesting British physician of the name Kenneth Heaton. Kenneth Heaton specializes in what is called intestinal ailments, and particularly what is called the irregular bowel syndrome, IBS, irregular bowel syndrome. And his theory is that IBS is often caused by gut bacteria and some kind of imbalance in that, and it can result in fatigue, breathlessness, and etc. And many of these symptoms can be seen. And Heaton goes into Shakespeare and comes out with a number of findings. For example, there is an essay, an article written by Keaton of the title Body Conscious Shakespeare, Sensory Disturbances in Troubled Characters, all the sensory disturbances in troubled characters in Shakespeare. He begins that essay by explaining a challenge, by saying that it indeed is a challenge both in literature and in medical science to explore characters in drama and novels, particularly to explore these characters and to reveal their mental states through the dramatized bodily sensation. That is, he talks about the corporeal manifestations of certain mental situations, and he says that we don't have enough study on this area. So Heaton then goes on to focus on a number of sensory changes that affect vision, taste, the heart, and the alimentary canal. Digestive system and the manifestation of that. He also finds out number of instances of vertigo experienced by characters, and he says there is some statistical information. He says that at least on 5 occasions it's a brilliant study, though it is made by a doctor. He has covered all the plays of Shakespeare and some poems as well, and he says that there are as many as 5 instances where Shakespearean characters are distressed by vertigo, and there are also instances of breathlessness, many of them representing hyperventilation, which according to him a situation which occurs as many as 11 times in Shakespeare's drama. Then fatigue, which I already mentioned as probably as a part of IBS, fatigue expressing grief, is articulated in several Shakespearean characters, including in Hamlet. Deafness, sensory closure, a kind of insensitivity, you can say, sensory blocking, happens in many Shakespearean characters under emotions. When they are high on emotions, they fail to listen or hear or even register words rendered by other characters. So the very expression turning a deaf ear itself probably comes from Shakespeare. So turning a deaf ear is a medical condition in Shakespeare and not a willful act. So that also is explained by Keaton. Now, moving further into a little deeper analysis of Shakespeare on medical terms, this is a little intriguing, a little complex, but then I think it's extremely fascinating. One finds Shakespeare being obsessed with a healthy body. Probably he didn't have one, or he didn't find many people around him having a good composition, physical composition. So he was obsessed probably with a good physical, corporeal composition. So you find like a kind of allegorization in Shakespeare. A healthy body is allegorized with a healthy state, and an ailing body is related with an ailing state. For example, the statement, something is rotten in Denmark. Now, what is rotting in Denmark is a political ill health as well as physical bodily ill health. So Shakespeare is found very obsessed with this particular situation. So exploring it further, one can say that the bodily pathology that runs in Shakespeare's Macbeth can be studied as an allegory of the political pathology. Macbeth is set in Scotland. Scotland, in that, though it is a historical play, Shakespeare deviates a little bit from that. But then the historical material indicates very clearly that Scotland didn't have a political stability. And Macbeth and many other characters articulate that. And you find that if you read that very minutely. What one finds is a reference to Scotland's body politic, which is frequently evoked and presented as a macro system of the micro manifestation of diseases on human body. Almost all characters refer to or complain about various ailments in Macbeth. So a kind of imbalance that happens on human body gets reflected in the political imbalance of the state as well. And the general feeling that one gets is that the imbalance or the blockage that Shakespeare refers to has a digestive origin. So let's look at that and see whether we can justify this kind of an argument. One finds in Macbeth a number of verbs like pluck and purge, a number of times being used in the distinct Renaissance sense, alluding to the herbals, and herbal medicines and herbal therapy are repeatedly evoked in Macbeth. So this constant reference to purging and plucking would indicate that Macbeth's physical body is suffering from a kind of a blockage. I'll come back to that argument just a little later also. And it is indicated that there are two possible ways of coming out of the blockage. One is by taking herbal medicines, and the other one is obviously with the help of a surgical intervention. And what Shakespeare indicates is that both in the case of Macbeth and in the case of Scotland, an external surgical operation is necessary. The surgical operation could also be a military operation, is necessary to purge the corrupt entrails of the state, which is represented by the blocked entrails of Macbeth, and maybe the consequence of Macbeth's tyranny or the impinging danger of the British and also the Norwegians around, and all of them being reflected and rendered in medical terms. So I move further into that argument, and I would consider this this very interesting allegorization that Shakespeare uses in terms of what I would term as the dialectics of self-anatomy. Self and the society, self and the state are represented as at the two ends of the spectrum in Macbeth. So Shakespeare's obsession with a perfectly functioning body free of any of the diseases is also Macbeth's obsession with a state. So let's see how it works in the play. Very pretty early in the play, we find Banquo, one of the characters, referring to, he could be the first among the characters referring to the medical situation. And he establishes the logical relationship between the quality of the diet, this was also a theory in the Elizabethan era, what you are, what you eat. So the very idea of eating and obesity, of course, was another issue among the rich class. So Banquo relates diet to the health precarity and also declining health. And in one of the situations in Act 1, Scene 3, he asks the question, when it comes to a kind of mental derangement that he's able to see in Macbeth, he asks the question, have we eaten on the insane route? He talks about an insane route. Have we eaten on the insane route that takes the reason prisoner, so that we surrender our reason? A bit of, if you could spend a bit more time on what this metaphor is all about, what is this insane route that Banquo talks about? Banquo makes it very clear, as Shakespeare does, that people in Scotland, though they used to drink less as compared to the Norwegians. So drinking heavily was a Norwegian habit, and it was again a Norwegian habit to to have ale, to have wine spiked with a narcotic which is extracted from a root. So this reference to this root narcotic route has a reference to the Norwegian influence on the Scottish society, social life. So that's what Banquo talks about. And then Macbeth, much later, evokes this complex body politic that is infested with some ailment. And only thing is that Macbeth is caught between the individual corporeal body and the body of the state. Now, it's worth reading that statement, or while addressing a doctor. He meets a doctor in the context of Lady Macbeth, who has to be now purged or cured. So he talks to a doctor. I'll quote that and I'll read. This is how that quote goes. If thou couldest, doctor, cast the water of my land, find her disease and purge it to the sound and pristine health, I would applaud thee to the very echo that should applaud again. Pull it off. Pull it off. 1 second. Sorry, I'm extremely sorry. Yeah. Pull it off, I say. What rhubarb, cane, or what purgative drug will scour these English hens? Now, very interesting remarks and a few interesting words in that quote. One is the word cast, which appears in the first line. The word cast here stands for diagnosis in the Elizabethan sense. He wants to find the doctor to see what has infected the water of his land, that is Scotland. What was infected, what kind of infection, what kind of contamination has gone into the water of Scotland, and find her disease. This again is diagnosis. And a point in perspective here is, those days, diagnosis used to be done on the basis of physical examination, 1, 2, examination of eyes, then the examination of pulse, and also they used to collect urine. So maybe a reference to water and diagnosis with the help of water could also mean the analysis of urine, but not in the pathological sense, but in a very crude way. They would collect. There are so many illustrations and paintings about doctors and surgeons carrying urine pots with them. So maybe a reference to that as well, and purge it to the sound and pristine health. So he is overlapping the health of the nation with the health of his wife, Lady Macbeth. And then still later, we find a reference to 2 herbs here, rhubarb and cayenne. Rhubarb, obviously, most of you know that it's a leafy vegetable which is used, rhubarb, with slightly sour taste, a plant with very sour leaves, used as a vegetable, and it is today considered to be antibacterial and antifungal. And it was also used right from the Elizabethan era as a skin cleanser, as a kind of cleanser. So also maybe a digestive cleanser at that point of time. So that's why Shakespeare refers to that. And cayenne, of course, all of you would anyway know, cayenne is a chili. It's a chili pepper, which has many anti-inflammatory properties and is also considered to be antioxidant in the contemporary herbal science. So he's talking about rhubarb and cayenne to be used in purging the land, scouring. What is scouring? Scouring is also a curative process where skin is cleansed by rubbing with some external object. So he's talking about purging the land of the disease of the English being dominated by the Britishers, Scotland being dominated by the Britishers. So a complex metaphor of diagnosis and cure goes into the analysis of the political situation. So this is the point that I was striving to make, the dialectics of self-anatomy. Self, in a way, is standing for the health of the nation and the society. All right. Another significant landmark work that I can put in perspective is a glossary which was published, a glossary of the medical terms in Shakespeare. It is published by a journalist and a teacher. After going through all the works of Shakespeare, came out with hundreds of words and terms which are related to Shakespeare and medical science. So it also has a seminal introduction which justifies Shakespeare's knowledge of illness, remedies, and healing practices. So if you go through that, this glossary classifies the terms into certain broader categories. For example, Shakespeare's use of terms related to physical and mental afflictions, Shakespeare's terms related to symptoms of various diseases, Shakespeare's references to diagnostic measures, remedies and their ingredients, surgery, very, very primitive though, there were surgeons during those times, anatomy, medical practitioners. There were also certain people called barber surgeons. They were barbers and also would attend to minor surgeries as well. Then certain laboratory devices, that is in terms of the pathology, not in the modern sense, but in looking at cases of jaundice and also analysis of urine and other ways of looking at that. So, one second. Extremely sorry. Yeah. So, in the context of diagnosis, one could refer to Hamlet. Hamlet, after seeing the ghost, is quite convinced that he is not under delirium or he is not under hallucination. And to make his point, he tells that to Gertrude. I believe this is a dialogue that, this is addressed to Gertrude. And he says, "My pulse, as yours, doth temperately keep time." That is, my pulse is regular. It beats 72 times like in the case of any healthy body, and makes a healthful music. So it creates a cadence, it creates a metronome, which is regular, and it indicates a healthy body. So what he means to say here is not that I'm not under the influence of hallucination and I'm not hallucinating, and hence what I say is probably true. In addition to that, we also find, as Michael Cummings, the writer, points out, there are many terms such as apothecaries. Apothecaries were the people who used to mix medicines, compounds and herbs. There were herbalists, there were barber surgeons. Many of them, these barber surgeons, used to attend to rotten teeth. If not by proper doctors, the barber surgeons would attend to the rotten teeth, the boils, skin blemishes, battle wounds, and bone setting. Remember these primitive doctors. And I already mentioned about bloodletting. Bloodletting is the opening of a vein, normally either surgically or using leeches, wherein the bad blood or excess blood is sucked off. And we also find a reference to a condition, a medical condition, a kind of, if not an ailment, a kind of disability, which is called kyphosis. Kyphosis is a situation of being a hunched back, a kind of deformity. We find a reference to that in Richard III. Among many such references, Cummings focuses on these interesting cases. Moving ahead, we also find a significant contribution in this direction of medical humanities in Shakespeare by a writer of Indian origin of the name Sujata Iyengar. Sujata Iyengar is a scholar, is a Shakespearean scholar. She is a professor of English at the University of Georgia, and she specializes on health and medical literature. And she wrote this dictionary, Shakespeare's Medical Language Dictionary, published in 2014, very interesting work, which also has a seminal introduction, which connects Shakespeare with the medical science of that time. And Iyengar has enlisted more than 1,000 words, which come regularly in Shakespeare, saying that Shakespeare is a very important connecting link between modern medical science and the medieval medical practices. So, a number of terms that she talks about include the entries that we find about various ailments, medical concepts and cures in Shakespeare, and the idea of the early modern body and the bodily functions and the pathologies in Shakespeare. I was already talking about that. Pathological science was at the infancy, but nonetheless, using the humor theory and also a lot of analysis of blood and not in the modern sense and urine, even the doctors could come to some conclusion. There are many words in Shakespearean language that you find related to many various ailments, like ailments and cure, like ache. And look at the spelling of the word abortion. It is spelled as ABHORSION, that is MTP, medical termination of pregnancy, which was in practice during Shakespeare. And aconitum is the term, another term that you find, which has a Latin origin. Aconitum is a herb that is used for fever. And then alchemist, of course, somebody who mixes chemicals for treatment. We also find a number of terms, quite a number of terms like alically. Alically, again, is a medieval term from Middle English, which indicates despondency. Then we have melancholy. The word almhouse was used for hospital. Apoplexy is a situation of being unconscious mostly due to a stroke. I request, I don't know whose mic is on.
Nikita, please mute your mic.
Yeah, thank you, Vinana. So there are also situations of apoplexy that is becoming unconscious due to stroke. Stroke is paralytic stroke. Today in the medical jargon we call it serious cardiovascular stroke. And there are references to artery, and atomy is a word which can be replaced today with anatomy. It was not anatomy at that point of time, it was called atomy. And Iyengar talks about these terms. And also she highlights a number of remedies. For example, barley broth. Barley broth, today, of course, we know that it is a very important diet for weight reduction. It lowers blood cholesterol level, and it is also a very meaningful mode of treatment for gallstones. So many of the patients of that era were given barley broth. Then bath, you know the significance of those baths, those hot springs which were used for many skin diseases and as cure for skin diseases. And it was also alternatively known as tub fast in Shakespearean language. Balsam is a herb used in the control of fever and certain other diseases. The term balm also comes there, and many other conditions and terms like epilepsy, faint, swoon, gout, jaundice, and lazar. Lazar is a term which is associated with a person who is infected with leprosy. Like a beggar who is the one who begs, Lazar is a person who is infected with leprosy. So you find a number of Lazars in Shakespeare, along with discussions on leprosy as well. So Iyengar explores almost all these medical terms and their implications and their contribution to the evolution of medical science and medical history. Moving further ahead, we could look at another work. Ideally, I should have started with this. It's one of the earliest enterprises on Shakespeare and medicine. It was done in 1884 by a doctor again of the name Jesse Portman Chesney. Jesse Portman Chesney in 1884 came out with a book of the title Shakespeare as a Physician. And her argument is that most of the Shakespearean plays can be considered as pathographic documents, records of various diseases and their diagnosis and treatment. And she mentions particularly some 5 or 6 categories of ailment and treatment in Shakespeare. And she underlines the point that Shakespeare was aware of the medicine, Shakespeare was aware of surgery, and Shakespeare was also aware of the existing techniques used in obstetrics. Obstetrics is in childbirth, right? So in the context of obstetrics, we find references to pregnancy and childbirth in Romeo and Juliet, and of course all too well-known case of Caesar being the first case of Caesarean that we talk about. And fish diet in Shakespearean drama is considered to be prescribed for potency. And in Henry VIII, we have a reference to midwife who is involved in obstetrics. And psychology, in a very crude form though, we find references to madness and cure of King Lear, Hamlet's madness, and ghosts who come repeatedly in many plays of Shakespeare, including Hamlet, could be considered as extensions and manifestations of hallucinations, maybe febrile hallucination, fever-induced hallucination. Then we have references to neurology, because there are many cases of epilepsy. Caesar, when he gets power and he falls unconscious, and it is related to his condition of epilepsy. Epilepsy was called the falling sickness, because one loses consciousness and falls. And then there is pharmacology, according to Jesse Portman. Pharmacology was largely in the form of sleepy drinks and drowsy syrups, which were prepared by the doctors. And interesting case of dermatology also. Skincare probably started during the Elizabethan era. And there are references to rouge to add to the ruddy color to the skin. And also pearl powder was often applied by the rich people, particularly the queens and the duchesses of the era, for glowing skin. So one finds reference to this crude but interesting forms of dermatological interventions also. Shakespearean drama is also obsessed in many ways with what is called skin blemishes, because skin blemishes are the most outward apparent signs of a body that is in some kind of humor imbalance. So we find a reference to birthmarks. Birthmark, Shakespeare articulates and subverts some of the popular beliefs about birthmarks. I'll talk about the birthmark being rendered in medieval and the Elizabethan era. In the Elizabethan era, continuing from the Middle Ages, birthmarks were considered to be the signs of bad omen, signs of evil, and even in certain cases, it was considered to be diabolic and a witchy manifestation. So children, babies who were born with dark birthmarks were considered to be inauspicious in Elizabethan era. But Shakespeare, probably with his medical knowledge, I'll come to that why he was medically informed a little later, but Shakespeare challenges this situation in Hamlet. And we have a very interesting statement from Hamlet, I quote, "So oft it chances in particular men that for some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose his origin." So according to him, it is a natural deviation, and it has nothing to do with a person whether he is good or bad. So Shakespeare articulates some amount of scientific approach, scientific mentality when he questions that. But skin blemishes continue to appear in Shakespeare in various contexts. Reference to a skin blemish adds to the rhetoric. It adds to the rhetoric of threat in Troilus and Cressida. This is the line: "I would make thou the loathsomest scab in Greece." Greek scabs were scared. People coming from Greece were kept away in the Elizabethan era, and the scab and the itchy scab from Greece was very infamous during that time. And skin blemishes are also used in the rhetoric of insult. In King Lear, we find a reference, "Thou art a boil, a plague sore, an unbossed carbuncle." Carbuncle is a growth, it's a facial kind of a facial deformity with some infectious boils that you find. And you find skin diseases are also evoked in conjuration, that is in magic. A classic case is that of Midsummer Night's Dream. And you remember it distinctly, the fairy king Oberon, towards the end of the play, he blesses the wedding beds, four wedding beds with dewdrops to ward off what he says, "Never mole, hair lip or scar shall upon their children be." So even in the world of magic, skin blemishes are evoked in Shakespeare. So multiple metaphorization of skin diseases in Shakespeare. All right, I'll take just, ma'am, if I have 10 minutes, do I still have 10 minutes more?
Yes, sir. Kindly go ahead. Please go ahead. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You are ultra generous, I would say. So, yeah. Another significant reference that we can bring about here is that of mental ailments, because we find during the Shakespearean era, before coming to that Elizabethan era, there were 5 major ailments apart from the mental ailment. The 5 major ailments which used to threat the Elizabethan common men were bubonic plague, malaria, smallpox, syphilis, and typhus. 5 of them. But it would be wrong for us to read into Shakespeare to say that Shakespeare could only understand the medical situation of Elizabethan era. That would be wrong, and it could be a kind of anachronism, because some of the Shakespearean plays are historical in nature. So he has drawn intensely and heavily from Roman history, Greek history, and so on. So I should also put on perspective that some of the diseases which were very, very threatening, life-threatening in the Roman era. So the empire, the Roman Empire, era of Roman Empire, Imperial Rome, you can call that Imperial Rome, was threatened by plague, many different forms of plague. And there was a disease called Gallic disease. Gallic disease was not named properly. Gallic disease is essentially syphilis, and also known as the French fever. Then malaria. Then there was skin disease, which was contracted by people kissing each other. So it was called kissing disease, which is also known as mentagra or kissing disease in the Roman era. So Shakespeare is mindful of the kind of shift, the kind of changes in the medical scenario between the Roman Empire and the Elizabethan era as well. Then, coming back to my basic argument here, that mental ailment is another fixation with Shakespeare, and the kind of treatments that we find. It's all too well known, Lear's madness. Half of the play is dominated by Lear raging in his madness. What Charles Lamb later terms as an effect of the pangs of abdicating royalty, reluctant pangs of abdicating royalty. King Lear's madness, and in As You Like It, Jacques' melancholy, Timon's bitter habit of cursing, Macbeth's visions after murder. We find Lady Macbeth also sleepwalking. All of them are the mental symptoms of mental ailment. So patients during those times were often given a combination of a treatment called bloodletting and purgatives. Purgatives were those herbal medicines to ingest and to cleanse. And for melancholy in particular, there are references even in Shakespeare about the doctors preparing concoctions made of leaves, roots, and seeds of plants, then mixed with oil of almonds, infused, boiled and reduced and strained with spices, and finally being added together with syrup of roses. Rose water as well as rose syrup was also supposed to be having calming effect on human mind. Very crude treatment for psychological maladies, but nonetheless they also existed. What could then be the sources for Shakespeare's medical information? Now, so far we have argued that Shakespeare indeed is a source of medical information for medical humanities and also for medical science, particularly 15th and 16th century, and even Roman medical practices are documented in Shakespeare. The other side of it, the flip side of that, is to see how Shakespeare was informed during his time. There are two theories about that. How Shakespeare got informed. One is that his son-in-law of the name John Hall was a practicing doctor. So Shakespeare must have had a number of conversations with him, and in the process he would have imbibed, internalized, and then used with a pinch of imagination in his plays and longer narrative poems. So that is one theory, that he might have got it from his son-in-law John Hall. The other theory is that Shakespeare was in close association with a fantastic Elizabethan actor, Elizabethan and Jacobean actor of the name Edward Alleyn. Edward Alleyn was a very rich, unusually very rich actor, because he was a hit on Elizabethan stages, the Globe, the Swan, and many. Alleyn's career was often threatened by the contagions, the pandemics around, particularly the bubonic plague which affected London, because he was a part of a traveling group, and he was daring enough at one point. The actors had fled London in the fear of under the peril of the plague, and he could eventually show tremendous guts in coming back to England and staging a number of plays even during the days of plague. So Alleyn had a very close association with, in his personal life, with a lot of ailments. And interestingly, Alleyn's father-in-law used to run the Bedlam, the very famous Bedlam Hospital. Bedlam Hospital was, apart from medical treatment, it was also a place where mentally deranged patients were admitted. So it was almost a kind of an infamous ending for someone to end up in Bedlam. So he was a doctor. He used to have some crude treatment for mental ailments, mental maladies. So being close to Edward Alleyn, Shakespeare would have again internalized some ideas about mental ailments and their possible treatment. And passing out, another point, that becoming unconscious is a very regular trope in Shakespeare. There are a number of instances where we can find characters passing out. Very quickly to look at that, in Two Gentlemen of Verona, in Act 5, Julia passes out at the grief of her lover's betrayal. So love failure and betrayal can also have physical manifestation. One. Two, in Henry VI, Queen Margaret, at the grief of her son's stabbing, becomes unconscious. That is another instance of a character becoming unconscious. Third, in Romeo and Juliet, the nurse, the very famous nurse in Act 3, again becomes unconscious at the sight of Tybalt's bloody corpse. And she cannot take that, and her immediate somatic response is to become unconscious. And in Antony and Cleopatra, Cleopatra becomes unconscious at the grief of Antony's suicide, reported suicide. And in As You Like It, we have this very interesting episode where we understand that Rosalind, disguised as a male, is ultimately a female, because she swoons at the horror of seeing Orlando's blood. With the popular stereotype is that women are mentally weaker than men, which could be questioned though, but then that comes in Shakespeare. So Shakespeare had no hesitation to making his plays a little more dramatic with adding a fit, as in the case of Julius Caesar, epilepsy, or a faint to a play so that the characters fall unconscious. And though these instances, particularly in historical plays, were absent, they were not recorded historically, but Shakespeare would add a fit or a feint to make the play a little more emotionally robust, appealing, and then interesting. Coming to my final submission, what do I then deduct in my ramble into the medical history of Shakespeare and the medical references to Shakespeare, the medical tropes and allegories and allusions in Shakespeare? I have some 6 major points to look at. One, I would say that the bard, Shakespeare, indeed tries to let out through his plays as a kind of a micro-macro relationship between body and the state, the corrupt blood of the toxic empire, be it the Elizabethan Empire or maybe the whether it is Denmark or Scotland. Then Shakespeare's language, among other things, I would say, is enriched with the medical metaphors, all the medical metaphors that I have discussed so far. Thirdly, Shakespearean plays are not merely morbid documents of ailment, but also documents of many therapies. We find many references to emetics, those purgative medicines, laxatives. All of them play central role in Shakespeare's medical imagination. Fourthly, the medical reality of the Elizabethan era reflected in Shakespeare is made of more verifiable categories such as surgeons, unlicensed provincial healers, midwives, barber surgeons, etc., all of them. Then another point is that Bard's imagination does not exclude one of the threats which had come into England through Spain and much of then subsequently through Eastern Europe. That is a threat of malaria. Malaria came in through the Eastern Europe when Eastern Europe came in contact with Asia and so on. So the term used in Shakespeare is ague, which was rife in the 16th century, and Shakespeare does underscore the impact of malaria also on febrile situation and the hallucination induced by malaria in his play. And I would finally come to the point that Shakespearean plays are important sources of pathography. I used this term at the beginning. Pathography is a text or a narrative about an ailment or a disease narrated by a doctor or by a patient, especially of those diseases which cannot be verified through MRI or any other pathological research. In particular, I would talk about headache, and not normal headache, migraine. Migraine is a situation which eludes even MRI. So Othello is reported to have frequent headaches and tearing headache in Othello. Also, there is a very interesting dialogue between Othello and Desdemona. Othello talks about a splitting headache, and in Act 3, Scene 3, this could be seen as one of the earliest instances of narrating migraine without even naming the condition to be migraine. And when Othello talks about the splitting headache, Desdemona gives a suggestion. So Desdemona says that you could tie your temple, forehead, tightly with a piece of linen, which continued to be a kind of an approach to migraine treatment, because there is no proper conclusive treatment for migraine. So I would consider this moment, this medical moment, this pathographic moment in Othello to be priceless in its contribution to medical humanities and medical history in Shakespeare. And Shakespeare continues to appeal to all of us in my concluding statement, also because of his in-depth and thoughtful engagements with medical conditions, diseases, therapies, diagnosis, and so on. So thank you so much. And these are my references, quite a few of them which start from 1884. As early as 19th century, as I said, scholars were interested in medicines in Shakespeare. Thank you so much. I hope I finished well within my time limit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We have so much to thank you. And I can see all the emojis over here clapping really. A big round of applause for sir. Sir, really, as promised, you're just amazing. You're absolutely amazing. And you've always been that way. And now this forum is open for anyone who would like to ask any question. This is your time.
Yeah, please unmute.
This is your time. Any one of you who would like to ask sir any question, kindly go ahead.
Anyone
Does
could
anyone have a question?
Yeah. Anyone could unmute and ask. Anybody with
Kindly unmute yourself and
is
ask
there any question in the chat box, madam? Madam, is there any question in the chat box? I don't know.
I can't see any question in the chat box. They're only thanks a lot, sir. They're all thanking you.
Okay.
If there are no questions, we have a very prominent, eminent personality. We have the principal of J.M. Patel College, and I would like to take the CS Karthik, sir. I can see principal, sir, over there. And we have respected Dr. Vikas Dhomne, sir, principal of J.M. Patel Arts and Commerce College, with us this morning. Thank you, sir, so much for being with us. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome, sir. And I'm sure sir would like to say a few things. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Very good morning to all of you. Before I begin my valedictory address, let me congratulate Dr. Dinesh Nair for his wonderful presentation today. I have listened and I've seen the entire speech, and it's very interesting for me, although I doesn't belong to English fraternity. My subject is physics, but very intelligently, Dr. Dinesh Nair has correlated Shakespeare's words into the medical field. It's really very interesting. As we come to the end of 7-day online certificate course in Shakespeare Studies, organized by Shakespeare Society of Central India, in collaboration with the Department of English of various colleges, namely RAJKUMAR, KEWAL RAMANI, KANYA MAHAVIDYALAYA Nagpur, HISLOP College Nagpur, Mahim College, J.M. Patel College Bhandara, and RS MUNDLE DHARAMPETH College Nagpur. We draw great satisfaction from the fact that over 150 students and even faculty members from different parts of our country participated in this very enriching journey. We had some eminent resource persons drawing our attentions to newer aspect and a better understanding of the plays and sonnets of Shakespeare. His work has contributed significantly to the enrichment of English vocabulary. Shakespeare introduced approximately 700 original words into the language, Many of us we still use in our day-to-day life also. There are a number of movies based on the Shakespeare's play, including Nata Samrat, that is a Marathi movie, Nata Samrat, Makbul and Omkara, and many more of these are there. I congratulate Shakespeare Society of Central India for conducting this certificate course. This is the second year in which our college has collaborated in this academic endeavor. Shakespeare's work continues to fascinate us despite the fact that they were written from 5 centuries back, long back, and still we remember, identify, recognize, admire Shakespeare's work. There is so much universal in Shakespeare's play that may continue to help us understand human nature even today also. As Dr. Dinesh Nair has rightly explained, there are Hamlets, King Lears, and Othellos amongst us even in this 21st century also. I really appreciate the cooperation shown by the Department of English of all collaborating colleges, institutions. May we have many more such activities in future also. Thank you, the organizing team, and thank you for giving me this opportunity for this valedictory address. Thank you very much. Over to you, madam.
Thank you very much, sir, for encouraging all of us. It has been a real source of encouragement for us. And your unstinting support all throughout is really amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to Kartik, sir. Thank you, everybody. And I would take a moment to thank Dr. Dinesh Nair for your really very stimulating, interesting, enlightening, enriching, and informative session lecture. I would say rather, you have gone an extra mile to get everything together. There's nothing that you left out, Really, sir, thank you so much from the bottom of our heart. Thank you on behalf of all the organizing committees, colleges, everybody. And we always look forward to hear you. As promised earlier, I did mention it's going to be a aha moment. And truly, I'm sure everybody agrees that it has been a moment to cherish, to remember. And of course, I would like to say that everybody has been thinking about it. There is so much more. It's never that we can say that we have known all, we know everything about William Shakespeare. There is so much more. There was totally a new paradigm, a new level, a new thinking, a new reasoning, and a new opening. And we look forward again, sir, in the near future that you will definitely come forward and say, yes, I'm going to be there. Thank you so much for that, sir. And I would even like to thank all the organizers from all the colleges who have relentlessly worked very, very hard, who stood with us. I would like to thank Shakespeare Society of Central India and Dr. Pranuti Chakravarti ma'am in collaboration with other departments of English, RAJKUMAR, KEWAL, RAMANI, KANYA, MAHAVIDYALAYA, NAGPUR. HISLOP College, of course, my college and principal has been extremely supportive. Patel Arts, Commerce and Science College, BHANDARA. Thank you so much, sir. MUNDLE DHARAMPETH Arts and Commerce College, Nagpur. Thank you so much, Principal Sir, Dr. Mohan Nagale and Dr. Manushri Sheikh Pandey, Dr. Kartik Panikar, Dr. Madhvi Mahar. I want to thank Usha ma'am especially because she has been from the beginning to the end, constantly working round the clock to make it very, very successful. She has not left any stone unturned to see that everybody gets this intellectual feat. It has been a feat indeed. And I'm sure all of you have really been enriched. Those of you who have been so very regular, they have never missed anything. And today, definitely, when we celebrate William Shakespeare, the legend lives on. He lives on, yes. And it seems like we just live in time. So with this, our course comes to an end. Thank you, everybody. Thank you once again. To all the participants, thank you, dear participants, for the patience, for being here. And because of you, we have been able to run this course. Just one thing I would like to tell all of you, and that is, you will be getting your certificates in a day. Kindly give us 1 day time do work on everything and you will get your certificates via mail. When you fill the feedback form, kindly write your correct email ID. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Principal Sir. Thank you, Dr. Ganesh Kaya. Thank you, Ucha Ma'am. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Dr. Veena, Dr. Isha, Dr. Karthik Panikar, and Principal Sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much,
Karthik sir.
everybody. Yeah.
Hello.
Karthik, sir, thank you.
Sir, hello.
Would you like to say something, Karthik, sir? Yeah.
Hey, wonderful, wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful presentation.
Thank you.